Hey, Catherine, how are you this morning?
Oh my gosh, so good. I'm so pumped to do this with you again.
Yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day. I'll tell you, as a lender, I think sometimes I have the privilege of like really getting lost in my spreadsheets, right? I'm a data hound, so like every single morning I'm on CNBC finding out what happened in Japan yesterday and how that's going to impact us today. But for the last couple of weeks, we've been really focusing a lot on data, right? Talking about interest rates, the rising, the falling, inflation, what's going to happen, forecasts, budgets, things like that, like really hyper focused to the impact that the rising interest rates have made on mortgage payments and that how that impacts buyers. I'm really excited today, though, to kind of flip the switch on you a little bit,
Yes.
and kind of get out from behind my desk and behind my computer screen, and talk a little bit about like how all of this like impacts people on the street, right? Like how has the impact of interest rates really affected buyers and sellers out there? So break it down.
Let's do it. Well, okay, let's go a little nerdy first because I feel like starting with the data is important, and that's why you and I have been having these conversations, really digging in over the last several weeks. But okay, so first of all, let's talk about the increase of inventory. So the rising of the interest rates have led to more active inventory. Now, a lot of people, when I have this conversation with folks, they'll say, oh, is it that we're having a lot more homes hit the market? No, it's just that it's taking longer for homes to sell. And therefore, we've had fewer pendings compared to new listings. So in regards to inventory, so for example, let's break it down. So Southwest Riverside County, okay? November of 2023, we had 1,550 active listings, okay? November in 2024, this year, we had 1,789.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like a huge deal, right? But it's a 15.4 increase year over year.
That's real numbers.
It is real numbers. Okay, so basically what happened in 2024, we had this steady increase of active inventory. In January, for example, we started out with 1,388. Then February, it jumped to 1,453, March, 1,525, and it was a steady increase through the year and just continued to grow. And then by September, for example, we were at 1,992. And we were like 1,300. But compared to 2023, the highest month was in January at 1,602, and the rest of the year, we hovered around 1,400 to 1,500 active listings.
So it kind of fell from there.
So, so we were at like 1,400 to 1,500 on average per month. And then in 2023, and then by September of this year, we're at almost 2,000. That is a big difference in regards to choices. So when you have more active inventory, that led to longer days on market. And that was, again, a lot to do with just cost of living, the things that we talked about the last several weeks. So in November 2023, our median days on market, and I like median over average because I feel like it's a more fair judge.
Right, more representative kind of.
Yes. So that was 16 days. By November of 2024, it was 23 days. That is a 43.8% increase year over year on how long it takes to sell your home. And basically what that caused was a little bit of market saturation. So by having this influx of active inventory, it made it more challenging for individual homes to stand out.
Okay, so that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot to understand. And if you're like a civilian, right, these numbers are just numbers really at the end of the day. But I've definitely seen a huge impact. And I think, sellers are starting to feel a little bit more confident in what's happening or going to happen next year. And, although, there's been this perception, I think that sellers have felt kind of like landlocked to their COVID-esque interest rate, that 3% interest rate. And it's made it very difficult to think about selling because it's like, what do you go buy after that point? I think now just the premise of living life is starting to reemerge as like the more compelling reason why you would sell a house, right? It is not just for the mortgage payment. And, so I've talked to quite a few sellers who are selling their house right now and turning around to buy a home. Yes. And although, nobody is like doing backflips over where interest rates are, they're still substantially better than they were like last November where we hit our peak.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, you talked to a seller last November when rates were hitting close to 8%. 8%, and you're like, hey, you want to sell your house at your 2.75 rate and go buy a house at 8%? Like that conversation was almost impossible to have.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, look, we're in the sixes, and sometimes we're in the mid sixes, which is not optimal. However, I can jump in, I can secure the house that I want, I can restructure our living situation to better suit our family. And we know, or we have a great deal of confidence that over the next couple of years, we're going to be in a good position, especially because of the equity we're putting into this home, right? To potentially refinance and make that payment a lot better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but anyway, so with all of this data though, like what does this really like lead to? Like just break it down for buyers and sellers out there. What does all this data mean for them?
Basically, buyers have more choices. Okay. So the question for sellers is, how do you ensure that your home is the one that they choose? And the thing that I've seen though, because you're asking, okay, how is this on Main Street, as you said? I am still seeing, even just in conversation and negotiations that I had just last week in submitting an offer for one of our buyers. Agents and sellers a lot are still in the mindset of looking at what their neighbor sold their house for, which that has been the case for a while now. Well, my neighbor sold their house for this, so I want to add a little bit more to that. What's interesting is with having more active inventory, with having more choices for buyers, that becomes ineffective. So during the pandemic, when we were pricing with our sellers, we were having to think, okay, we're probably going to get multiple offers. It's going to go way over asking. What are we going to do about the appraisal? Because I don't have market data to support it. Now it's flipped, and the market data absolutely supports the price, but it's more about positioning yourself so that your house is the one that people come to. Not that you want to leave money on the table, not that you want to lose money, but it's about strategy in that regard. So that has been a shift in how sellers need to look at it. And so for example, that example I told you for those buyers, the agent, she's an out of area agent. This particular home was in Spencer's Crossing, which has high Melrose and a higher HOA, wonderful amenities, absolutely amazing community. Nevertheless, we have the higher insurance costs, the higher interest rates, the higher taxes, and the higher HOA. That all compounded comes to an overall monthly expense that is much higher than it would have been when the interest rates were a lot lower, and it helped offset. And so she kept saying, oh, I'll send you the comps. I'll send you the comps. I didn't have the heart to tell her. I'm like, I know the comps are there to support it, but let's look at the active comps. Here are the other homes I'm showing my client that are very similar, that are priced less. And therefore, that listing was on the market for 122 days when we wrote that offer.
Oh, wow.
You don't want to be there.
No.
And when we were watching it because they really liked it, but they weren't happy with the price, which I know it would appraise, but they weren't happy with the price. And so we watched it, and they did a reduction of $10,000. It was their second choice. Their first choice, the seller decided that she was going to stay put. Totally different story. So we watched it, and we saw that they dropped it by $10,000. And so we then wrote an offer, $20,000 under that, as a shocker. And we ended up under contract for $5,000 under where they had just reduced to, which was a $10,000 reduction.
Okay.
And so we got a $15,000 reduction from where we were when we saw it.
Okay, pretty reasonable, right? I mean, everyone kind of met at a place where it was
medium.
Advantageous for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what that means in that. But what I'm noticing is that what we're seeing is price reductions. So we've seen more of those down arrows, which you and I talked about a little bit.
Right.
And so I said that push and pull that we had. For those sellers and agents that are still kind of in that old mindset of what worked 2 years ago, you're seeing those properties sit on the market for longer, and you're seeing the price reductions continue to happen. And I even talked with the gal yesterday, a home that I had put on the market. I had to have a come to Jesus moment conversation with my seller when we were actually going to sell her home in the summer, but something happened personally and she had to take it off the market. And from when we had listed then to when we listed this time, there are a lot more options in her particular neighborhood. And so I had to explain to her, we aren't looking at the sold comps right now. We have to beat, here's this one. This is the most comparable to you. We got to beat them. So we undercut them by 5,000. And I got a call from an agent just yesterday saying, my listing has been sitting on the market and what's going on. And I had to share with her what was going on because her seller is wanting to kind of think in that old mindset.
Right.
But she's done little bit, but that longer days on market just hits. So, I mean, that's one of the things we're seeing is the price reductions for those that push back.
So, old habits are definitely hard to break for sure. A lot of people are having difficulty making the mindset change that things have pivoted a little bit. But earlier on, you mentioned a word, and when you said it, like all my radars, my bells and whistles went off, and that was the word strategy. Right, which I think is vastly missing from our industry, and it's so important. So let's get strategic, Katherine. Right, like you represent a lot of buyers and sellers out there. So I want to really focus on sellers here for a minute. Okay. Right, mainly because like this is a part of the population I rarely interact with, so I'm like super interested and curious myself. But like from a seller's perspective, like if I was a seller, how can I take a strategic approach to making a decision that this might be the right time to sell my house?
Sure. Okay. So here's some tips. So first of all, we talked about the fact that we're seeing those price reductions, seller concessions, and buyer's desire for move-in ready homes. Those are two things to be cognizant of as well as a home seller. So when buyers have more choices, they are, well, first of all, you think, okay, we talked before about how closing costs are more than what they were,
right?
Because of how the lending institutions make their money, and knowing that rates are going to come down, they have to charge more up front. So knowing that buyers are going to have to put more in up front, they are now thinking, oh gosh, okay, I really need a home that is dialed in so that I can take that time to rebuild the savings again to do those projects. And so number one, so the first tip is shift in pricing of property. So we talked about, instead of focusing on the solds, focus on the actives. Mm-hmm. So really look and see what your competition is. Where are they priced? How are they being marketed? And what do they look like in comparison to yours? Are there some little things that you can do to position yourselves in a better position to theirs? But basically, you want to be the one that the buyers want to go see.
Would you ever advise in a situation for a seller to do like small upgrades to the house, or like where do you draw the line of like what
Absolutely.
makes sense?
Yes. And that answer is going to be very different for each seller. What they have in regards to budget available, the time that they have, just to be able to have things done, resources. Now, of course, me and my team, we are a full service team, and we always say we got a guy. Anything that you need done, we can help facilitate with that. But just what you want to do is, if you are thinking of making a move, what are the things that you would do if you stayed over the next 5 years? Okay. What are those improvements that you would do that you would enjoy?
Makes sense.
And walk through, when I do my consultation, when we're getting ready to put somebody's home on the market, we start out front and we walk through the property, both outside and inside, with the eyes of the buyer. And we think, okay, what are the things that the buyer's going to notice, both in regards to condition and how the property is presented? So if it needs a fresh coat of paint, or having the carpets cleaned, or maybe it does make sense to do some improvements like a bathroom remodel. I've had sellers be at one end where, okay, all we can afford is get it decluttered, clean the carpet, and do some touch-up paint, and that's it, and that's what's in the budget. And then I've had clients where they do some major remodel items because we have, connections, and they have connections to where it financially makes sense, and they more than recouped the numbers.
Okay. So, but depending on where they fall in that spectrum, based on those things, like you said, like their resources, their time, their financial capability, I mean, that has to ultimately impact like net, right? Like what they're going to be able to sell their house for and how quickly they may be able to sell their house.
Absolutely. And how quickly is a big part of it too. So obviously you don't want it to be a money pit. You don't want to pour money into a home and then not recoup it.
Sure.
Right? So it's really just a matter of leaning into your realtor who hopefully has that knowledge of what is going to be worth doing and where you are going to maximize the dollar spent.
Love it. Love it. Okay, another strategy. This is great.
So offering incentives. So I have Tracy's house. I think I might have mentioned Tracy in one of our previous conversations. So Tracy's home in Ramona, from January to September, inventory literally doubled.
Wow.
And bless her heart, the most amazing, intelligent woman. I loved partnering with her. I mean, she just was one of those dream clients. We had this great partnership. She listened, she respected the information that I brought to the table. And we just unfortunately went on the market in a time where all of a sudden buyers had so many choices. In addition to that, Ramona is a little bit more of a drive. So the people that were looking at her home were those where they couldn't afford closer in, and they were then having to go, okay, I'm going to be driving a little bit farther to work, but I really want space, because she had a special property where she was on an acre. It was space, and it was a great family home. So we tried all sorts of dang stuff. We were looking at the analysis of what was going on in the market. I was talking to other agents. I was finding out what was working, what wasn't working, and most of it wasn't working. And so we had to do some price reductions.
Okay.
And eventually I said, I sell a lot of new construction, and I get all the emails from all of my, partners in the builders' offices saying, hey, we've got this, we've got that, we've got this incentive. And which it's nothing new. They'll say, hey, we'll offer you a closing cost incentive if you use the builder lender and, blah, 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 blah. Well, I got this one where it was saying, okay, we'll offer this particular rate, but you have to be under contract by this date and you have to close by this date. So I said, okay, what if we kind of go that way? And we say, okay, we'll offer we were thinking of doing a $20,000 reduction. Mm-hmm. I said, how about instead of doing that $20,000 reduction, we say, okay, seller will give you a $20,000 credit towards your closing costs to use how you like with their lender, not requiring using any particular lender, to use how you like, but it has to be with a full price offer. You have to be under contract by this date, and you have to close by the end of the year.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
And
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of a strategy like that.
We were
Katherine.
under contract in less than a week after that.
Okay, let me put some money behind what you just talked about, right? From a buyer's perspective. So you're talking about a seller that you're contemplating doing a $20,000 price reduction.
Yes.
But instead of doing that, you then offered the buyer the equivalent, the $20,000 towards their closing costs, which net to your seller was the same thing, right? Reducing it by 20 or giving the seller 20. So what a buyer could do with $20,000 credit is monstrous, right? Don't get me wrong, that's a big number, but net on a mortgage payment, Katherine, it translates to about $140, right? Like net when all is said and done. So with $20,000 of cash, a borrower could completely cover their entire closing costs element, including upfront paying their taxes for the next, 6-month period. But in addition to that, there would be money left over to potentially do either a permanent or a temporary interest rate buy down that would actually net that payment being lower than the $140, and they got an additional $15,000 in the bank when all is said and done.
Thank you. Exactly.
That's monstrous.
And that's why we did it. Because so any agent that called, I would say, hey, talk with your lender. And actually, we got numbers, to kind of reflect this, to show, okay, if you were to do a 2-1 buy down, this is what it could potentially cost. And this is what the payment difference could be. And the payment difference was huge. And then, of course, you just refinance in a 6, 12 months when the interest rates are are lower, and then any money that you don't use from that 2-1 buy down, put towards your principal, and it's a win-win.
Totally.
And so, I did have to have some educational conversations with some agents, including the one that we went under contract with, but it was far more effective. And like you said, pretty much the same for my seller. Now, we're selling at the same price. So like there's a slightly different commission difference, but it's really
fairly
not
negligible,
much.
right?
Yeah, it
right.
really is. But for the buyer, it's a huge difference.
And the seller sold their home.
And she really had to get closed by the end of the year for certain reasons.
That's a killer.
we met that goal.
So, Katherine, when in that relationship with the seller do you start having strategy conversations like this? Is it just when it becomes reactive, like, hey, your house isn't selling, so let's get to the drawing board now?
No, I have those conversations right off the bat.
Okay.
It's up to the seller how much they want to engage.
Sure.
With
So you're
that.
setting expectations, though, that, hey, this
Yes.
is a real plausible situation here.
Indeed. I really show where the market is at right now. And I show, hey, by my experience, here's what I'm seeing. Here are what my own clients are experiencing in this market. Here is what I'm finding works and what doesn't work, and also knowing the different communities and how that impacts, and then giving some suggestions of things that could be effective. And then it's up to them, because again, we empower with the information, but it's up to them on what they choose, on what they want to do.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Katherine, just to kind of wrap this up, like, it's really enlightening to hear how all of this financial impact and these ups and the downs and the further sort of path that we have in front of us here, right? There is no crystal ball. We all know that. But things certainly seem to be on the up and up. And it's just really cool to see how some folks out there, I wish I could say that us as an industry are really embracing the things that we're talking about here today. But that's why I just think it's so important for people to do the right research and find the right person who understands the pivoting marketplace that we're in. Because if you don't, you might not have such great stories like the one that you just told there. It can end considerably different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What worked before may not work now, but what works now is extremely effective. So
I love it. I love it.
Smart choices.
That's very cool. Well, thank you for unpacking all of that, Katherine. That was super cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.